Welcome back to the Pride and Puck podcast. This is episode 34 of season 4. We are back for another big year of hockey guests and talking about queer hockey. If you are here for the first time, thank you for joining us. If you're returning to this podcast, thank you for coming back and supporting us. If you want to find us across the socials, it's at Pride Puck Podcast. Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. We're also on YouTube as well with the same handle. So give us a like and a subscribe. If you're listening in podcast form, please hit the follow button and rate and review us as well. It helps us grow and reach out to more people. In this episode, I sit down with Darcy Green, an author, a hockey player, a hockey coach, just to talk about their journey in sport, finding sport, their identity, joining Southern Lights and what that means to them as a non-binary person, and also authoring a book and what could possibly be in the future for hockey romance novels as well from Darcy. It's an awesome chat. I hope you enjoy it. Now we'll get to the episode with Darcy. Darcy Green, welcome to the Pride and Puck podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's pretty cool because we'll probably find out as we go through on the episode a bit more, but I feel like the tables have turned a little bit sitting here tonight, as usually you are my hockey coach. And you're telling me what to do, and now I've got the what's the word? Like I'm running the show here tonight.
I was about to say, yeah, you've got control. Enjoy it for this 45 minutes or so before I take it back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So no, it's really cool to have you on. We're going to get stuck into a fair bit of stuff in the next, say, 45 minutes to an hour type of thing. You are an author. Your book recently come out not that long ago. What's it been like, I suppose, the whirlwind of being an author, having it published? And I've seen across your socials you did a lot of signings and things like that. Has it settled down now since it's come out?
It has settled down a little bit. The immediate 6 weeks or 2 months after the book was published in September were just crazy in a good way. There was lots to do, and I was having such a good time promoting it and talking about it, and that was great. But it was also pretty hectic, and I think it was the first time I was doing it. It was my debut novel, and also a novel that I hadn't expected to publish traditionally, and to sort of be launching with all of the bells and whistles. So it was a very fun and also quite strange period in my life.
Do you get noticed at all, like out anywhere?
Oh,
like for heavy. Like, I was just thinking about it because, like, through hockey, and we'll talk about it later. Like, I've met people and become friends with people like yourself, really, that found hockey through books. So I just wondered through these romance novels and stuff if anyone had seen you out and about and said, "Oh, that's Darcy Green."
No, I can't. I wish I could say that someone had, although I think I also wouldn't quite know what to do if someone recognized me from my socials. I get quite a lot of messages from people, and it's really lovely to meet people who have come to an event specifically to meet me and talk about how much they love sport and how much they enjoyed reading the book and all of that sort of thing. But no, I'll let you know in the future if someone sees me on the tram and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, it'd be super cool. It really would. Just talking about sport. So growing up, you were heavy into Aussie Rules as a kid. A lot of people know it as AFL. I'm guessing that was your first sporting love.
Yeah, it really was. It's funny. Looking back on my childhood, I don't remember when I first got really obsessed with AFL, but I must have been quite young. And I grew up in Adelaide, so I guess it's an AFL city, and my dad loves AFL. So that was the sport that was on at home. And actually, I still find the sound of AFL commentary really soothing as a background noise. There's just something about the rhythm of it that I love listening to. And so, yeah, I was really loved the players, loved everything about it. But I guess partly because I was assigned female at birth and was being raised as a girl, I don't think I ever really thought about playing it, even casually. I wasn't a super sporty kid anyway, but it never crossed my mind that AFL was a thing that I could do.
It's funny that you talk about the commentary of the AFL. Just quickly, I was saying to my wife the other day about baseball, and I love the ambience of baseball, and I can sit there and listen to it on the radio or on TV, and it just relaxes me when I'm listening to baseball. Very similar, but that's also assigned female at birth. And I was when you mentioned that to me, I was actually thinking too. My wife, who played Aussie Rules as a kid growing up, but had to play with the boys. There was no other area of Aussie Rules growing up and playing sport. And I suppose you would have gone through that as well, like looking around, not just at Aussie Rules, but sport in particular. It wasn't, I suppose, the focus that we see now in women's sport.
No, and it's really interesting reflecting back, because I wasn't a super athletic kid. Once I learned to read, I stopped going outside, really. I was a pretty active kid until I realized books existed, and then I was just gone. But throughout my teen years in particular, I would not have thought of myself as a sporty person at all. I was never interested in playing any of the sports that were offered at school and all of that sort of thing, which is funny to think of now, because now I play sport all the time. And it creates this weird dichotomy with people who met me from when I was about 26 or 27 onwards, because they think of me as quite a sporty person, but somewhere deep within me, I still think of myself in the same way I did when I was young. And so it's always this shock when I'll be like, oh, I'm not really like a sporty person. And someone will say, what do you mean? You play sport all the time, which is true. I do. But I think I was actually thinking the other day, the first time I played AFL, and I was when I was an adult. And the first time I tackled someone was one of the most bizarrely liberating experiences of my life, because I think in contact sport, there are problems with contact sport, but the fact that I could just see the person with the ball and knock them over in order to take it away was glorious. And it really was this sort of sensation that I had never experienced before. And I think particularly when you're being socialized as a girl, you're often taught, like, don't make people uncomfortable, don't take up too much space, be really aware of how other people are feeling and all of that sort of thing. And then you're suddenly in this context where you can, within the rules of the game, just physically use your strength and abilities and everything to clean someone up in order to get a ball. And I absolutely loved it. I was like, more of this, please. I think if I'd had a different childhood, I reckon I would have played rugby. I think rugby might have been the sport of my heart if things had gone differently. We'll never know, though.
I love that story, though. Did you apologize, like, the first time that you sort of tackled someone? Did you say you're okay? Because I know when playing hockey for the first time, and it's obviously non-checking the leagues that we play in, and you might knock someone over, you sort of straight away, my reaction is like, are you okay, when they're on the ice? Did you have that for your first tackle, or you were just no?
I don't remember having that reaction. I think I was just like, wow, this is great. I want to keep doing this. But I was also reflecting that I think for lots of people who grow up sort of socialized as boys, and I think to a lesser extent girls, there's this whole area of like playfulness, right, around like wrestling with one another and sort of testing your strength against other people and screwing around. And I think people at all ages kind of do it, but especially boys and men do it way more, where there's something kind of satisfying about just being able to tussle with someone a bit. But that was completely alien to my experiences, and getting to do that in any context, I was suddenly like, wow, this kind of, it's just fun to test your strength like that and to be in that context. So, I mean, obviously not fun for everyone, but it appealed to something deep inside my lizard brain. I was like, yes.
And you did mention that you were into books as a kid. Did you ever think back then that you would be an author, you'd have a book published? Did you ever think anything along those lines?
I think when I was a kid, because I loved reading and I loved writing and I did really well in English, there was always this idea that one day maybe I would publish a book. But I think when I was a kid and into my teens, if I'd thought about that, it would have been a sort of work of literary fiction of some kind within the like established tradition of serious books to be published. But then in my late teens, I became a massive romance reader, and sort of from then on ended up publishing a romance novel. So I think there was probably, I thought maybe I'd publish a book. I think my family all thought maybe I would publish a book. They definitely did not think I would publish a queer AFL romance. That was probably a surprise. And very sadly, my gran, who loved books and writing and supported me so much, she passed away quite a while ago, so she did not see the book get published. But I do have to admit that I think explaining to Gran that I was getting a book published, but that it was a fairly smutty romance novel about 2 AFL players probably would have been a challenging conversation for both of us, but I reckon she would have read it.
Yeah, that would have been cool to have that experience though. One of the things I actually want to ask you before we move on, because it was one of the things you told me before we came on, was you started riding horses. And you got right into horses. And I've had people on this podcast before, and I've just asked them, since they've shifted over to hockey, a lot of people have come from different sports or different things in their past. Is there anything from horse riding that you carry over into hockey? Anything at all? Because I know I've had rugby players on here before, and they tell me different things that they take from rugby into hockey that helps them. And I'm just curious if there's anything from horse riding that helps you when you're playing hockey.
That's such an interesting question. I don't think so. Nothing I can think of, except maybe tolerance for pain and willingness to put up with high levels of discomfort. But no, I don't know that horses really taught me. I had no skills that suggested I should play ice hockey, to be honest. I couldn't ice skate. I'd never played hockey. I'd never played a game involving hitting anything with a stick before. So like I had zero of the aptitudes you would expect, but I was just really determined.
And now you're not only just playing hockey, you play as an out skater, you play as a goalie as well. So you've jumped right into the hockey scene.
Yeah, I tend to do that. I've never been able to be chill about anything I liked. It's either all in or I'm not invested. You don't really get much in between those two things.
Sport has played a massive role in your life. It's not just playing the sport and enjoying the sport for what it is. It's actually a big part of your identity as well. Like finding your identity, I suppose. And because when you first started playing sport, you weren't out as queer. Did you know that you were part of the community then, or you just weren't out, or was it something that you found along the way?
It was something I found along the way. It's funny because I came out when I was about, I think I was 26 or 27, which is, I mean, it's not super, super late, but I had lived quite a lot of life by then. And it's also quite funny for people who have met me more recently, because I think there's a general perception. They're like, how could you ever not have known? Like, you are definitely a very obviously queer person. But I think I hadn't spent very much time around queer people, but particularly queer women. And I hadn't really spent any time with like non-binary people or trans people. It just wasn't an experience I'd had. And I think for me, because I was looking for a sports team to join because I wanted to make new friends and kind of wanted to do something outside of work. I was in Sydney, which wasn't where I grew up, so I didn't have much of an existing network of people. And I thought, I'll join a sports team. And then there'd been more coverage of the AFLW and everything. And something in me was like, why don't I try AFL? That there wasn't a better and more obvious sport. So I was like, I always liked AFL, I'll give it a go. And the team that I joined, the Newtown Breakaways, had a great time playing for the Breakaways, but was, I don't know the exact statistic, but probably 90% queer. And so I was suddenly in a context where I was spending time with all of these mainly queer women, but also there were non-binary people, and just seeing, I suppose, different ways of being in the world and hearing them talk about their relationships and how they experienced attraction and all of that. And I feel like suddenly being in that context made me think, oh, maybe this is me as well. And also, I just had the most catastrophic crush on one of my teammates, to the extent that it just obliterated plausible deniability. I can remember I just had a moment where I was like, oh, I definitely don't just admire her football ability. Like, this is, I can't deny it anymore. And actually, the funny thing about that team was that I realized I was queer about 3 months into playing, but I never had to come out to the team because everyone had assumed I was queer and I'd never told them otherwise. So I didn't have to come out in that context because everyone, that was just already an established fact. They knew before I did, apparently. So yeah, that was it was a big time for me, working some things out about myself.
It's a story that I've heard a lot, especially with Aussie Rules footy. Had a few guests on that have played Aussie Rules or AFL, and yeah, that environment, they speak of it very, very glowingly and very highly. I was going to ask you, was there a moment like within, I suppose, the team or the locker room where it really clicked in your head that, hang on, this is me, like this is who I am? I suppose you might have just answered it.
I think it was that was probably the biggest click moment, was when I realized that I did just have a huge crush on this other woman. And I was like, that does not seem like a super heterosexual thing to have happen. But I think it had sort of been building over time. And there were gradual things that made that click kind of happen. And I think a big one was, part of me had always thought that if I was queer, I would think about women the way straight men talk about women, which I know sounds odd, but my main exposure to people being attracted to women was hearing straight men talk about women, and some of those straight men were not particularly respectful about women. So I think for me, I'd always been like, well, I don't feel the way about women that straight men seem to feel about women. At this point in my brain, I wasn't thinking much about anyone who was sort of bi or pan or anything else, because that hadn't really entered my sort of discourse about myself and queerness. And I think being around a whole lot of queer women made me see that actually, no, there are lots and lots of different ways to be attracted to people. And the fact that I didn't experience attraction to women the way that I sometimes heard men talk about it didn't mean I wasn't queer. And so that was sort of, I think, significant in me working out how that I was queer, and also how I felt about my own queerness.
There's a lot of people, a lot of queer people who don't think they can or should play sport. Like, it's crazy how many queer people actually feel like that sport is something that queer people shouldn't do. Do you feel like that Aussie Rules was the perfect place for you, to begin your journey, I suppose, within yourself and your identity?
I think it was. It was also, I say this with love, a fairly messy place to begin that journey, because I suppose, you're in this context where there are a lot of queer people, mainly women, all playing sport together. And because it's footy, you go to the pub after, and then you stay at the pub, and then you go out, etc. So it was a glorious but messy and chaotic time. But yeah, I think it was just the right one, in the sense that I really needed that space for queerness. And I think what probably subconsciously attracted me to AFL was the fact that it was a really overtly queer space in terms of women's footy, and always has been, and is notoriously, a very queer space. And that was just kind of what I needed at that point in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. You did go as well. You went as part of your footy journey, I suppose. You went and played footy of all places in the UK.
Yes.
And while you're over there as well, you did find love.
I did. Yeah. Footy is very deeply entwined in my life at this point.
What was that experience like, I suppose? And I suppose playing a game that is inherently Australian in a place like the UK and the situation around finding love over there.
It was very fun to start with the sort of playing footy aspect, and this is probably something that applies a little bit to playing ice hockey in Australia. Because in the UK it's a pretty niche sport, it just creates this real community around it and a real sense of fun. A lot of the people, so I played in a sort of university league because I was studying there at the time. I think there were 4 teams. Many of the players were Aussies who were over studying, and then there was sort of a mix of other people who'd gotten dragged into it by their Aussie friends or who thought it looked fun. And we used to play 9-a-side on rugby pitches because, of course, there weren't ovals for us to play on. And playing in the winter was exactly as kind of dire as you might expect, including on one occasion we couldn't play a game because there was too much snow. And so it had to be like, no, I actually don't think you can play AFL if the ball has might freeze into kind of a deadly missile. But I had such a good time because I loved playing in Australia, but I will always be a terrible AFL player. And so I think in Australia, the base skill level for lots of people playing is quite high because it is a sport that heaps of people have played since they were kids and lots of people play it. Whereas when I got to the UK, the fact that I knew all of the rules meant I just soared in terms of my value to the team. And I went from being a terrible player to someone who was firmly in the sort of middle in terms of quality. And then I also understood how the game worked. So it was fun. And I think everyone playing was just doing it for fun. And that was really what I wanted from sport, was not the competitiveness and not having to, I will always care about winning because I'm a competitive person, but to be in an environment where everyone was mainly just there to have a good time and make friends and go to fun places and kick a ball around. That was great. But I met my wife for the first time at a screening of the 2018 grand final, which started very early because it was England. So it must have been 4:30 in the morning or something. And it was the first event I went to after getting to England to start my studies. So I sort of rocked up at, 4:30 in the morning to the common room that it was being held in. And Miranda was there because she was the president of the Oxford, Australia and New Zealand Society at the time. So she was hosting. And so I was welcomed into this space by this very charming and handsome woman in a Collingwood jersey who offered me some avo on toast and a coffee. And I was like, wow, I'm pretty sure she does not remember meeting me because Collingwood, of course, lost. And so that day is a deeply traumatic one for her. And so I spent the whole time kind of being like, Miranda's very cute. And Miranda spent the whole time laser focused on the game. So that was our meeting. And then we played footy together and sort of gradually got to know one another better. And now we are married.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. I love it. And for people who might be listening from, say, Canada or the US or overseas in Europe, I suppose Collingwood and Toronto are probably the sort of very similar in terms of
that really upsets me as a Habs fan though. I'm gonna need to take a second. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Well, people don't really they don't really like the Maple Leafs, and not many people like Collingwood. So it's
that's very true, except Collingwood supporters. Yeah. You are one or you're really not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was actually, when you said about the base level, it's funny. I was talking to Cade Matthews about when Cade went over to Seattle Pride Classic, etc. And Cade's like, the base level for Canadians for hockey is really, really high compared to what we have over here. So yeah, I understand exactly what you're talking about. Your hockey journey, though, it started through novels.
It did.
Do you remember the first hockey romance novel that you read?
So I don't remember the first one that I read, but there is a particular series that really, I think, twigged me wanting to play, which is that there's a series called the Penalty Box series by an author called Ari Baran, and they're good fun. If anyone who has encountered them knows that it is insane that I read particularly the first book, which is about two enforcers on rival teams falling in love. It's crazy that I read that book and was like, this seems like the game for me, because a lot of the book features them kind of beating the crap out of one another. But I think the thing that really shone through to me is Ari is a massive hockey fan and also has an encyclopedic knowledge of hockey as a sport and is so academically interested in hockey. I got to know them relatively well because I sent them a crazy fan message and they responded and we started to talk. But they just have this like love for the game and level of knowledge about the game that meant when I was reading, as someone who was aware that ice hockey was a sport, but that was basically all I knew. It just never really occurred to me as a sport to watch or engage with. And the way that they wrote about it on the page and the way they created the sort of atmosphere of what the sport was like really intrigued me. And I think at that point in time, I was also looking for a new sport to play because as much as I love AFL, I never enjoyed playing it as much as I wanted to. And so I was like, I need a new sport, a new project. And then I was reading this book. I was like, there's just something about the way this person is writing about this insane sport, because I love hockey, but it's objectively ridiculous. It's like, yeah, put the knife shoes on and get on the slippery surface, and then we're going to whack around a vulcanized piece of rubber. And also sometimes there'll be breaks where a couple of people just fight, which is ridiculous. But it appealed to something within me. And I was like, you know what? I want to play this sport, so I better learn to ice skate.
But it just works though. When you talk about hockey like that, for some reason it works. It all mashes together and it works. And hockey's a wonderful game. Just a little side, I suppose, topic. Are you surprised with the reaction and how much heated rivalry has done for hockey? I'm not talking about, say, the NHL. I'm more talking about the PWHL especially, but local hockey too, especially here in Australia, the Australian Women's Ice Hockey League, and even local clubs like our Southern Lights. Are you surprised of the impact heated rivalry has had? Or do you think, as a person who's read so many novels and an author yourself, that you probably might have expected it?
Look, I didn't expect it, to be honest. So I read heated rivalry during that initial sort of ice hockey romance bender I went on, where I read every queer ice hockey romance novel I could lay my hands on. And it's been slightly weird to see this thing that was part of quite a niche aspect of my life, sort of queer romance, explode everywhere, to the extent that all of my colleagues are talking about it. You know, my mum is asking me about it, all of this sort of thing. But I think it's interesting because I think there are lots of reasons the show has done so well, including that it's just genuinely very fun. But I feel like maybe it has partly revealed that there are lots of people who are kind of like me, in the sense that they just need a little push to get right into a particular sport. And I think that if you watch heated rivalry and you're like, ice hockey seems cool, then in Melbourne at least, you know, you don't have to look far to find something that you can do to channel that energy. And I think there are probably lots of people, particularly sort of women and queer people, who probably are people who enjoy being fans of things and fandom and all of that. But sport has typically been pretty alienating, or not something that they've wanted to invest that energy in. So I suppose heated rivalry has perhaps brought ice hockey to the attention of a pretty big group of people who might otherwise not really have thought about it. And I think some of those people will probably genuinely sort of become fans and follow the sport, which is awesome. And it's great that the PWHL is there as well for people who would prefer to follow a women's league rather than a men's league.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did see today when Southern Lights put out expressions of interest for Div 10, looking for some players, and then they put out a post that saying it was full. So maybe, you never know, there could have been some heated rivalry fans that have maybe seen the post and thought, you know what, I might give hockey a go, which is awesome. I like asking queer people this when they start hockey. Do you remember the first time you laced up skates and hit the ice? And what did it feel like for you in that moment of starting this new sport that you'd seen through romance novels, but actually finally, I suppose, doing what you were reading?
So I do remember the first little while of my hockey journey did not bear any resemblance to a romance novel at all. I remember the first time I went to skate, I was taken by a very kind friend of mine from Scotland who could skate, and she spent most of the time kind of squiring me around with me holding onto her so she could like tow me around the ice. And I finished that with a lot of determination to get better, but also a lot of fear. And I think it took me, I did not find learning to skate easy at all. It took me a really long time. I progressed pretty slowly, I think, for all sorts of different reasons, including my sort of feelings about risk and the fact that I am not good at doing things that feel very unsafe. And I think part of skating is you just have to get a level of comfort with trying to gain speed and momentum and the fact that you will fall and all of that. And then when I started, the first time I sort of had all my gear on and properly went to do anything hockey related was probably a sort of hockey academy type class. And again, they tell you that you don't need to be able to skate to do the beginner classes. I think that's a lot. I mean, it's true in the sense that you can do them. Will it be a really miserable experience? Potentially. So I had a little while where I was really battling with like, I want to get better. I want to do this thing, but it was tough because I loved the idea and it was really satisfying every time I managed to do something I hadn't been able to do before. But I did feel a bit like I'm never going to be able to play. And then I actually think I ran into a Lights player when I was buying skates, and she was like, "You should come and play for the Lights." And I was sort of like, "Oh, I don't know, like I don't think I'm good enough," and all of that sort of thing. And she was basically like, "As long as you can go forward and mostly stop, you should just come and play." And so I took that advice, and I'm so glad I did, because as soon as I sort of actually played a game, I don't remember my first game very well, presumably because I was so nervous. I just was completely on another planet. But as soon as I actually started to play, I realized like how much fun I found it. And also I think you stop, I overthink everything. And I think once I started to play, I stopped thinking about skating and just did it, because suddenly it's like, oh, well, I'm not thinking about the different components of skating. I'm just thinking, well, the puck's over there and I need to go and get it. So I'm going to do that.
I think you also just naturally adjust when you're out on the ice to your limitations until you increase your confidence level to maybe stop or things like that as well. I was going to ask you, going through like hockey school, did you know Southern Lights existed as an inclusive queer hockey club? Or was that the first time you knew about Lights when you had that interaction?
That was the sort of first time I heard about the Lights was when I was buying skates, and I ran the Zoe then became my coach, which was really lovely and feels like a classic small hockey community story. But that was my first. Actually, no, that's not true. I was in choir with someone who played for the Lights, and that was the first time it was mentioned. But I don't know if I knew it was specifically queer and inclusive, or if I just knew that my queer friend played, and so I was peripherally aware, but I didn't really know what the lights was until that later interaction.
And from that interaction, you're now playing for the Lights. You're now a coach of the Lights, as I mentioned off the top. You're a coach. You're my coach. You're my teammate as well. When we don't have a goalie, you're now jumped into there. You're heavily involved with the Southern Lights. What do they mean to you, and how big of an impact have they had on your journey? I know you spoke about earlier Aussie Rules and finding your identity, but I think when people play a new sport, especially queer people, and they find a club like Southern Lights, which is very inclusive and a great environment to be around. How much of an impact has Southern Lights had on your journey to this point, I suppose, being so heavily involved in it now?
Yeah, it's had a really big impact partly because when I sort of first joined was also the point where I had realized I was non-binary and was starting to come out as non-binary, which in some ways was more challenging than coming out as queer, because I think coming out as queer, there were challenges, but I knew that most people in my sort of immediate life, my family and that, would be supportive. And it's not that I doubted that about coming out as non-binary, but I think people just know a lot less about being non-binary. And so it can sometimes be stressful because there's all of this context you sometimes have to explain you sort of have to come out, but you also have to explain to people what it all means and all of that sort of thing. And so that was something that I was sort of dealing with myself. And I was also, in my non-writing life, I'm in a fairly conservative profession in general. So I was sort of trying to work out how that would work and whether I wanted to be out at work and all of that sort of thing. And then the Lights was just this context where I could go and be myself, and everyone, I didn't have to worry about whether it was inclusive and whether people would understand what being non-binary meant and whether it was okay to ask people to use particular pronouns. And I also think for me, it was really special to be playing in a mixed gender league, because it was this space where, for once, my gender was kind of completely irrelevant to the experience I was having, because it didn't really matter what my gender was or how I identified or whatever. I would still be welcome in this space no matter what. And I felt like for once I was meeting a lot of people who didn't really care about my gender, not in a bad way, but in the sense that I was meeting people who didn't feel the urge to immediately allocate me to a binary category. And so it was this really great space where I could just go and kind of relax and feel like I had a little island away from some of the stresses that come with being queer and non-binary outside inclusive spaces.
Do you feel like if you didn't find Lights, one, you would have kept playing hockey, and I suppose two, how much of that, if you didn't find Lights, I suppose, do you think would have affected that journey of your non-binary journey?
I think it definitely would have been a lot harder. I'm not sure if I would have kept playing hockey. I might have, but I think so much of what I enjoyed was both the sport itself and then also the environment and the friends and the collegiality. And it was really great to also just meet other non-binary people and get to talk to them about their experiences and to be in this community where I could have those discussions and feel supported, and not even necessarily have very profound discussions about things, but just have people who you could share small annoyances with, or like send memes and all of that. And so I really felt like I got both in the Lights. And I think also one of the reasons I got involved in coaching and that sort of stuff was because my first season was a really positive experience. And I've had a fairly mixed bag of coaches in various different sort of things that I've done. And I feel like, especially for queer people in particular, but also, to be honest, for a lot of cisgender women as well, really traditional, like bro sports coaching is often awful for them. And I say that as a fairly like anxious person who is not naturally super athletic, having a coach who is all about like, you need to do better, you need to work harder, that's not acceptable, it just does not motivate me to do well. Because when they sort of are saying all of that, it's supposed to fire you up, right? So you go out there and do better. But instead, I'm just like, oh, I always suspected I was terrible, I'll just leave. And so I think having had a really positive experience myself with the lights and wanting other people to have that, I really wanted to be a part of kind of welcoming people, especially people who might not otherwise be playing sport. Because I feel like in an inclusive sports team, you've probably got some people who have played a lot of sport and they probably play anyway, and they would probably fit into lots of different teams. And then you probably have people who, if there wasn't an inclusive option where they felt safe, they just wouldn't play sport. And to me, like, trying to make sure that those people have the experience that I kind of had, where the sport and also the friends have been so wonderful and important, is just something that I care really deeply about, because it pisses me off so much that so many people have never gotten to have a good experience of team sport. Because, you know, like, I mean, some people just don't like sport, and that's fine. I completely get that. But I feel like there are lots of people who don't like sport because their experiences of sport have been terrible. And in fact, they would love it if they had a chance, like I do. And the fact that people miss out on that is so sad. And I feel like teams like the Lights can give people a chance to have that experience. It's never too late to kind of learn that you like to be on a sports team.
Yeah, 100%. And I fall into that category that you just mentioned, of someone who played sport my whole life. And I could go to any sort of club, I suppose, and sort of just fit in there. But the issue with that is that I wouldn't be able to be my 100% self. And I know that for a fact, just because of that I suppose, bro culture that you sort of mentioned. And I was going to touch on your coaching, is because I feel like, I find it when I do this podcast, I feel like it's very special to be able to give back to community. And I feel like I do that with this podcast. And I get the impression that it means a lot to you as well, in that sense of being able to give back to your community through coaching. But how special is it, I suppose, to coach queer people and help guide them through sport?
It's really awesome. And I think I love it, and I take it really seriously. And I would be the first to say that I'm not a coach who knows everything there is to know about hockey. My sort of level of knowledge and experience is very specifically targeted to teaching people sort of who don't know much about hockey how to play the basics of hockey and how to win Division 10 games, which is a very different proposition to winning a sort of NHL game. But I think the thing that I really hope I can do is for the people who are sort of like I was, and who are stressed out for all sorts of reasons coming into a sporting environment. I think because I had such a positive experience, I really want those people to have that experience. And to some extent, that is less about me knowing all the things there are to know about hockey, which I absolutely don't, and more about me trying to make sure that we're creating a vibe and an energy in the locker room and in the team that is focused on the things that I feel like are important, which are like, yes, we want to play good hockey. Yes, everyone wants to learn, but also mainly we're here to have fun. Because to be honest, if you are playing a 10:30 p.m. Division 10 ice hockey game in Australia and you are not having a good time, what are you doing? Like, get an easier, cheaper hobby. If you aren't like having fun, why? Like, you could be asleep. You could be doing anything else, and instead you're leaving the ring at like midnight to drive home with your bag of absolutely reeking gear in order to rock up at your job the next day. Like, I think you've got to keep a focus on the fun being at the heart of it. And that doesn't mean that you can't get better and play really good hockey, but that part of it, I think, is also a journey that's different for everyone in terms of how quickly you learn, etc. And I feel like at a level where people are just getting into sport, it's really important to be having a good time, because what's the point if you're not? And B, to also feel like it's fine if you make mistakes or if you don't get better as quickly as other people who you play with, because it's not about being the best or winning. It's about the fact that you are maybe doing something totally new and that you get to go and have this experience where you don't think about anything else for the hour when you're playing hockey. And like, maybe you can't do crossovers or whatever else, and that doesn't matter as long as you're having a good time and getting a bit better each week. Because to be honest, like, I want to still be playing when I'm like in my 70s or whatever, if I can. Like, we've all got time. So yeah, I really hope that as a coach, I'm able to first and foremost make people feel like they are supported and welcomed, and that they can make mistakes and that they should be having a good time.
Yeah, 100%. Especially when you leave the rink at midnight and you live 2 hours from the rink. You might
I don't know how you do that one. That's a level of commitment that I really envy, because I reckon if I'm about sort of 20 minutes away, 17 at midnight, because no traffic, etc. And I don't know how you do the 2 hours. It's heroic.
I did see a post the other day too of a 70-year-old. I think he might have been in Europe somewhere, possibly. So there is plenty of hockey people that are playing hockey at 70. And I hope to be exactly like you, still playing hockey at 70. And hopefully Southern Lights is absolutely massive hockey club by then.
That'd be it's a pretty awesome thought.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy because doing this podcast off queer hockey is very interconnected around the world now. A lot of people know each other and everyone supports each other. It's amazing. It's not just Southern Lights. It's obviously we've got Harbour Lights in Sydney, but also we've got Capital Riot in Canberra now. But also the other clubs around the world. So everyone's connected. It's super awesome. 2 more questions for you, and I'm going to ask the one that I ask everyone when they come on. But one before that is, and a lot of people probably want to know, is there a smutty hockey romance novel somewhere along the lines?
Look, to be honest, probably. My second AFL novel, which will probably come out in May 2027, has an ice hockey subplot, and in that ice hockey subplot are definitely the seeds of a potential ice hockey series or similar. I feel like the danger is, if I wrote an ice hockey series, everyone would look at them like, oh, where am I in these books? And I would undoubtedly be accused by various people. It's like, oh, this character is based on me, which would not be true, because the last thing I want to do in my sort of fun romantic fantasy worlds is to sort of import people I know from real life. That's kind of strange. But I feel like I would answer a lot of questions along the lines of like, but which character am I, etc. So, and I feel like I'd have to be careful not to upset anyone with sort of specific details or observations about things. But I think it would be fun to write a kind of beer league, rec league romance, because there are a couple out there, but most of the hockey romance in the world is sort of about NHL players. And personally, I think that rec league, especially Australian rec league, has a very specific, delightful energy, and I would really enjoy writing a couple of books about people who are not professional hockey players, but who are like playing in their rec league team while also having jobs and other responsibilities. But we'll see. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And if in one of the novels a podcast host pops up, I'll just assume that it's about me.
Yeah.
No, that would be really cool. It really would be amazing. Yeah, the one question that I actually ask people when they come on, you've done so much within hockey in a short space of time, really, as well, I suppose. You're not someone who'd played hockey since they were a little kid and all that sort of stuff. Playing, coaching, being involved at Southern Lights. What's been your proudest moment within queer hockey?
I think a couple of times people have sort of come to me and talked about the fact that the way that I coached them or encouraged them had made a really big difference for them in how they felt about playing. And that is really special to me because that's sort of the main thing. That's what I care about more than anything else. So and I've always thought, if it's only one person who you coach them and you make a difference to how they feel about, if everyone else is kind of neutral, or because there are lots of people who, if you would have played anyway and you could be on any type of team or whatever, I know that, maybe you don't get that much out of being coached by me. I hope that you would, but maybe you don't, and maybe you would prefer a different type of coach. But as long as there's like the odd person who says to me like, oh, it made a really big difference that the way that you coached, or like this thing you said helped me feel comfortable, or like I'd love my friend to come and play for your club because I know that you're a coach who would support them. Like, that's incredibly special to me, and I feel really honored that I get to coach despite my level of inexperience, really, in terms of overall hockey knowledge. And those have been the moments where I've been like, oh, that just makes me sort of unusually emotional and is really special to me, more so than anything more kind of outward facing.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was beautiful. A long answer.
No, that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Because as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, as someone who a lot of people will know that I've been around hockey for a long time with this media stuff, but I never played hockey myself until I played winter last year in 2025. And I'd never actually done hockey school or anything. But when I came down to Div 10, I got accepted. And I did the training. I think I did one training before we played our season. I had no idea how I would be on skates. I'd rollerbladed as a kid and I was pretty good at that, but outside of skating regularly, never. And I feel like if I had a different coach, and yourself and Sadie and Ben, who are the other coaches as well on our team, I wonder how that would go if it was a different coach, where someone who was so fresh, who had not done hockey academy and not done hockey school and things like that. So I totally, what your answer is totally on point, I think, in the way that you coach and how you make people feel when they walk into that locker room. So from my point of view as a Div 10 player, you should be really proud of the way you coach with new people coming in each season.
Oh, thanks. That's really lovely to hear. I'm gonna get all emotional about this. No one ever really makes me cry or anything like that, and I'm like, I'm getting a bit choked up talking about my feelings.
But it's true. But that's the power of I've found that's the power of inclusive clubs and these queer clubs all around the world and within Australia, is that they create this for queer people, that they find that comfort and level of respect, I suppose, within the locker room to a new sport that they're walking into, that they might not have played ever before. Something brand new, as you said, you're putting blades, knives on skates and getting out there. So really, really cool and 100% spot on with your answer. Before I let you go, can you just plug your book, what it's called, where that people can find it, and all the good stuff?
I absolutely can. So my book is called After the Siren, and it is a queer romantic comedy about two AFL players with some history who unexpectedly become teammates and work out that they don't dislike one another after all. It is if you are a heated rivalry person, I feel like you would probably like After the Siren. It is a very fun, quite silly romance novel, which nonetheless I think actually touches on a lot of the types of themes that we have talked about today. You can get it in most places that books are sold, and it's also available as an audiobook, which a lot of people have really been enjoying lately. And if you want to follow me on the socials, etc., I'm Darcy Green Writes on Instagram and TikTok. Those are the two best ones. But I also have a newsletter which you can sign up to through my website, which is the best way, really, because then we are not beholden to various corporate monoliths in terms of communication. So yeah, those are the places you can find me.
I'll chuck all of that stuff in the show notes as well. Once this goes out, just quickly before I let you go, did you do the voice for the audiobook?
No, no, I cannot think of anything worse. This is a really shameful confession to make because the voice actors are so amazing, but I've not listened to it because just hearing my own words read back to me is completely agonizing for some reason. Like, I love the book. I think the book is great. Do I want to have it read to me? No, I do not. And the idea of reading my own sex scenes onto audio is like, I just don't know why anyone would want to listen to that, to be honest. And I definitely would not have wanted to do it.
Yeah, when you frame it like that, maybe a little bit weird.
Yeah, I also don't know that there are quite a few accents in the book, not necessarily from the two main characters, but like one of the secondary characters has an Irish accent. No one wants to hear me try to do an Irish accent. It's not within my skill set.
Darcy Green, thank you so much for jumping on for episode 34 of the Pride and Puck podcast for season 4. It's crazy that it's 4 seasons.
Yeah,
I really hope thank you. I really hope you've had fun just talking about a bit about your journey in sport, in your identity and Southern Lights and ice hockey. I think a lot of people can take out a lot from what we've been talking about tonight and your journey into ice hockey and everything that you're doing now through your novels and all of the good stuff that you're doing around the queer community. I think it's amazing to be able to give back like you do with everything. So thank you so much for jumping on and joining me for this episode.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a really wonderful chat, and you also do amazing work for the queer and hockey communities. So thank you.
We will be back next month for another episode of the Pride and Puck podcast. Until then, I'm Andrew McDougall, and that was Darcy Green. Ciao.